Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and medi-spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Minnesota Twins. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to a great season in 2023. Led by all-star Brian Buxton and acclaimed manager Rocco Baldelli, the Twins anticipate the return to the active roster of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and will be fighting for another division crown and to add to their 2 world championships. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 microdistilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, and all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Welcome to another edition of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. It's my pleasure to invite back to our studio today a return visitor. Colleen Moriarty is the executive director of Hunger Solutions Minnesota, one of the premier nonprofits in our state that is fighting food insecurity and hunger in our state. Colleen, welcome back to Access to Democracy.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm delighted to be back.
And we should tell our viewers, by the way, just a quick technical note. Normally, we would do our interviews in studio, but today, due to technical issues in the Eagan TV studio, we are doing this interview via Zoom today. So thank you for accommodating us. So I'm interested in asking you, for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you become involved in anti-poverty programs and fighting hunger? What led you to the career that you have?
Well, you know, Steve, most of my career has been focused on anti-poverty programs. I started out as a child care organizer, and then I went to work for Care TV for a number of years, doing organizing around the state on health issues, and created the health fair with them. And from there, I went to City Hall in Minneapolis, where I spent 14 years, first as the director of the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board, and then as the chief of staff to Mayor Sharon Sells Belton. From there, I was recruited actually for this position, and I really didn't have a background in anti-hunger relief, but I did have a long background in poverty programs. So I quickly became acquainted with it, and it's a more complicated system than you'd imagine.
Mm-hmm. I was intrigued to read in your background, your father and grandfather were politically active in the DFL party. So you grew up with activists in the family, so to speak. And
I did.
I'm intrigued by this. I saw that your father would ask you every day, what did you do for someone else today? So
right.
It seems to be the case that right from the get-go, you had family that were pushing you in the direction of being an advocate for other people.
Yes, we were. My grandfather was a district court judge, ran for Congress in Scott County, and my father did advanced work for the Kennedy administration and was a lawyer in Minneapolis. Yes, I think it was kind of a combination of New Deal Democrats and poverty programs that came later on, coupled with our faith, which was we're Irish Catholics, and so that kind of caring for community, extended beyond just our family, but more representative of what we could do to make a difference.
And I understand they also had a motto that they ingrained into you: we bend, but we never break.
Yes, that's so true. Good research. That's
That's
right.
good
Like
advice
bend
for
not through the
people who
door.
are
And that's my grandfather would say that a lot. We bend but never break. He also was a great steward of democracy, and he really felt that people deserved a right to fairness in every element of their lives. And he was a towering, a man, 6'4", and he still lives on in stories with my grandchildren. And so he's really made an impression through the generations of Moriartys.
That's a wonderful legacy, Colleen. So tell us more about Hunger Solutions Minnesota. You have been the executive director there, I believe, since 2004. Do I have that right? So
right, almost 20 years.
20 years coming up
Right.
next year. So what is the mission of Hunger Solutions Minnesota? What does your organization do?
Well, Hunger Solutions Minnesota was really formed by a merger between the Food Bank Network and the Food Shelf organization. And I think that after I was appointed the executive director, I narrowed the focus in on appropriate public policy that could make a difference long-term in helping to move us forward on bringing an end to hunger in our community, and also on really listening to community in a new way so that we would have not just an academic response to the problem as it existed, but we could reflect what was really going on in people's lives. So we work on a wide variety of hunger issues. For instance, our legislative agenda this year is representative of universal meals for all school children, market bucks programs, which is people who are on SNAP and can use them at farmers markets to get an incentive to get more fruits and vegetables, and then representing food shelves and the dramatic need that they have now.
Right. And we should be clear with our viewers, Hunger Solutions is not a food shelf.
No, we're not.
Food shelves. So, but you do provide people a link through the Minnesota Food Hotline. Tell us what that is again and what the phone number is for individuals or families that may need help getting food on the table.
One of the things that we found out and that we knew, but we used the helpline to try and kind of traverse the system because it can be very complicated. Where do I go for SNAP? Where's my nearest food shelf? Or if that's not appropriate and you don't have a place to cook, where can I go for a meal program? How do I get my kids signed up for free or reduced lunch? Where do I find summer food for kids or senior programs? And so we have the Minnesota Food Helpline, and we created it, I want to say 12 years ago, but it is 1-888-711-1151. And the real joy behind the helpline is that there is no push one button, push another button. It's real people who will accept your call. So that's been very, very meaningful to people, and they can call back and they can get, other assistance if they need it. So
a real important place people can go to help them get connected to the help that they need.
Right.
Yeah, very good. So tell us, you talked about not just studying hunger and food insecurity issues as an academic exercise, but dealing with real people in the real world, real life issues. But you also use data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and other sources, which you use that data to advance your advocacy work. Tell us a little bit how that works.
Absolutely. We do the distribution for state and federal funds that come through both in the form of commodities, or what people would once known as the old cheese program, that is really the backbone of the emergency food shelf system, which has more than 300 plus food shelves in the state of Minnesota. And Steve, that's why, just a little aside, that's why we didn't see the tremendous lines during the pandemic as we saw in other places in the country. The reason for that is that we have a really robust response to that. With over 300 food shelves, there's one in your local community. And so that's your trusted neighbor who you can go to for help. And the food banks serve as more of a warehousing kind of opportunity to redirect product and to secure product. So yes, we use data in a variety of ways. We keep track of people who come to the food shelves. The food shelves report their data to us. we use that to be the nominator for state funds and other kinds of funds that are available. How many people did you serve in the last 6 months? And we do a breakdown of some of the, demographic groups. We also have the TFAP program, and we do that on the basis of numbers of people living in poverty.
And say what that is, Colleen. What does TFAP stand
for? So it's the very sophisticated, the Emergency Assistance Food Program. The federal government was not, they did not make that one complicated. So, and that's the commodities. And the way that that's distributed is we work with the 7 food banks in the state of Minnesota. 6 of them are Feeding America and 1 independent, the food group. And we distribute the commodities based on the numbers of people living in poverty in those communities. And that's been tremendously meaningful because it's really high quality product. It's protein, it's fresh fruits and vegetables. It's, all the things that people really need when they go, dairy products and, shelf staple things like rice or things like that. So those are products that people really need. I think, you have to remember in our world, someone has a hunger need, and it could be met from a variety of different ways. Mm-hmm. It could be that they're on the SNAP program, and mm-hmm. they can go to the grocery store and purchase products. They cannot purchase anything prepared or any household items. It's right. Just food. So if you are, in extreme circumstances, you may need those other things. So oftentimes in food shelves, you'll find paper towels, toilet paper, dog food, the kind of things that you cannot buy on SNAP. And usually a person who's living in poverty has a need for more than just SNAP. They also probably visit a food shelf. And if they're elderly and can't cook, they probably go to a meal program, or they have a box of food, or Meals on Wheels comes and visits them.
And so for them, food insecurity is really, it's just one symptom of a larger issue of being in poverty.
Right. Really, money. Food insecurity means you don't know where your next meal is coming from. And so you can imagine what a stressor that is on people, whether they're 6 and in school and don't know if they're going to qualify for free or reduced lunch, or if they're, going to experience any kind of drama when they get the lunch, or for a senior who really isn't confident in their ability to be able to use stoves right. and other things, and really needs assistance.
Right. And we should say a word here too about why the collection of data about people visiting food banks and children needing meals in schools, why that's important, because it informs the work of policymakers when they're developing budgets, allocating appropriations to pay for these things that people need, right? It's really important to them.
I can give you a perfect storm kind of example of that right now. Last year, or this year, between 2022 and 2023, we saw 2 million more visits to food shelves than we had the year before. And the reason for that is that we were able to keep the numbers visiting food shelves down during the pandemic because we had a lot of federal resources that were helping families and single adults be able to secure enough food that they needed. Once those started peeling away, then we saw those people moving to food shelves. And now, because we are almost going to be at 6 million visits as we close out the year, we have gone back to the legislature. Hunger Solutions has gone back with our partners and asked for an emergency appropriation that's expedited of $5 million to be able to get that out to the shelves. It's a stressor of food inflation, which we're all experiencing, the cost of food, the availability of food, which was dramatically impaired at times coming out of the pandemic. And then just the elements of need are really there. We also are looking down to March, when the emergency designation of the state of Minnesota will blink off. And the only advice really even the national groups have given local states is we're going to redirect people to pantries or food shelves. So the fact that we need to be ready for that is even more of a realistic view and the way that we can respond.
So I want to ask you, Colleen, a very basic question so our viewers have a better understanding of the extent of this issue and hunger in our communities. You know, I think a lot of people have the misimpression that hunger is an issue in the core cities, perhaps in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but oh, it's not in Dakota County or in the Egan, or it's not in rural Minnesota where they produce the food.
Mhm.
Give us some insight. Describe for us, if you would, just briefly, what is the extent of hunger and food insecurity in Minnesota, geographically, ethnically, socially?
Well, it's not, obviously, it's not just a core urban issue. In fact, we have farmers who visit food shelves during the winter when they don't have enough food. And it's, about 15 years ago, we started to see this real rise of poverty in the suburbs. And that was, even back as far as 2008, when we saw that recession. We saw people who lost their jobs or became reemployed at jobs that weren't earning the same kind of living that they were before. And so we saw poverty in the suburbs really rise. Now there's always been poverty in rural areas, frankly, it's maybe been hidden or not, not as highlighted as it needed to be. But rural areas, particularly, as you can imagine, in northern Minnesota, when the mines go down, and when there's natural disasters in the Red River Valley, when people lose their jobs in manufacturing, and even for farmers, I've gone to, through the years, many updates with the agriculture community, and had farmers say, if it wouldn't have been for the food shelf, or it wouldn't have been for those free meals my kids got in school, we wouldn't have made it through the winter.
And there may be a lot of farm families where a woman is living alone in a farm home and her husband has passed away, perhaps widowed.
Right.
And also the geographic distance, the challenges of getting from a farm to the nearest town where there may be a grocery store. Sometimes you have to drive a long way. People may not drive anymore. So just accessibility to food becomes a problem. Turns out this is a really complex issue.
It is. The once local grocery stores have been greatly impacted by the advent of the big Walmarts and other things more regionally. And you're right, driving is an issue. And a lot of times, you hear people talk about urban areas and how people depend on corner stores for food. Well, in the rural areas, you're at the Holiday gas station or the Stop and Save that you're depending on for your food, because you just don't have the transportation, or it falls at the wrong time of the week when someone could give you a ride. And they're just those local outlets.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We've heard people do a talk about so-called food deserts, which usually people think of that in an urban application, but it can happen in rural areas too, for the reasons that you're talking about.
Yes, several years ago, the Zupp's grocery store in Cook, Minnesota burned down. And the only avenue for getting groceries was Duluth, which is a long way from Cook, Minnesota, or up through the Canadian border, and it was at least 150 miles. So we moved quickly with the IRRB, which is a regional response governmental organization.
Iron Range Resources Board.
Resources and Rehabilitation.
Yes, thank you.
And so we moved quickly with them. We've got an allocation from the state. We worked with the Zupp stores. We brought in mobile food. And, that really carried that community through until the reconstruction of the store. But you'll find that in many rural communities, there just is not a local response anymore. And so that presents a real challenge for people.
So I want to go back to an issue that you just alluded to briefly. We're going to delve into a little bit more detail. The state of Minnesota is now projected to run a 2-year budget surplus, a record projected budget surplus, $17.6 billion, billion with a B, over the next 2 years. Governor Tim Walz has said it is his goal to make Minnesota the most child-friendly state in America. He intends to do this through an initiative he's proposed to the legislature, a package actually of tax credits for children. And one of the key aspects of this is universal free school lunches for Minnesota students. You talked about this briefly. Why should Minnesota do this? What are the benefits that come to all of us from Minnesota providing universal free school lunches?
This is something that Hunger Solutions has been absolutely committed to for 15 of my 20 years. We've been working on moving towards free school meals. And the reason for it is simple. The current system that we have places children in jeopardy. It really does. It makes an adult issue a child burden by some of the practices that the districts have had to use or have chosen to use, where they will, there's been incidences through the years of lunch shaming, dumping children's lunches in front of them, stamping their hands with a money sign, putting a rubber band around their arm and snapping it and saying, you should go home and tell your parents to pay the lunch bill. And if you have a couple of kids, it's $3.50 a day. So that's real money if you have a couple of kids in school. And we need to eliminate those burdens for children. And that we have gotten such a great response from the state, both in the government state and from the people in the state of Minnesota, who absolutely, whether they're conservative or progressive, agree that this is the way to spend some of the budget surplus, but also to assure that kids have the right to a nutritious meal, breakfast and lunch in school throughout the state of Minnesota without the burden of paperwork, and that this may be the most nutritious meal some kids get during the day. And we really don't make kids pay to ride the bus. We don't make them pay to get a book. So we shouldn't withhold nutrition from kids because they are under pressure for whether they live in poverty or not.
Do you think the fact that the Minnesota Legislature, for the first time in some years now, is going to be under unified party control? We're going to have a DFL Senate and a DFL House. Is it likely that this will pass this session?
Yes, I think it is very likely. There was a lot of momentum for it last year. And then we had a divided legislature, and we had, no agreement on health and human services and education. This year, I think we have a real chance. And, I'll give you, for instance, of why I'm so hopeful. In the past week, everything at the legislature has sped up unbelievably, which is really fun. And I was testifying in front of a committee about the $5 million that we had requested, and the vote was unanimous. Democrats, wow. Republicans. You can't ask for anything better than that. And that's what we're seeing.
Let's switch gears here from the state spotlight to the federal spotlight. The largest federal nutrition program, SNAP, used to be called the Food Stamp Program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. But we also have the Women, Infants, and Children Program to help pregnant mothers, young mothers, be able to feed their children adequately. There are some in Congress now. We are beginning to hear a drumbeat, particularly on the Republican side of the aisle, talking about the need for cuts to so-called entitlement programs. Right. And let's be very clear about what we're talking about here. Beyond even just the nutrition programs, Social Security is an entitlement program, right. Medicare is an entitlement program, that if you meet the legal definition of eligibility, you get the benefit. But you have people now who have suddenly become deficit hawks, who were pretty much mute for the 4 years of former President Trump's administration, didn't say a word about the deficit, and couldn't do enough to cut taxes for the wealthiest people in America. How do you view what's unfolding in Washington right now with these calls for dramatic cuts to so-called entitlement spending?
I think that the minute that they delve into what the kind of effect is and what that means to people in this country about cutting Social Security, Medicaid, or even in our discussions about the Farm Bill, which is more where most of the money comes from for nutrition spending in our country, they will find that the public is not responsive to that message. I think the midterms show us that they're not responsive to that kind of punitive message. And President Trump found that when he started to cut those kinds of programs, particularly farm programs, there was a whole world of hurt there of people who are connected to the rural communities and connected to agriculture who had a lot to say about those kinds of cuts, and they were not pleased. So he had to reinstate them to really gain that kind of block. So I think that, we are in a place now to talk about the fact of how important these programs are and to let people know what it means to them.
Right. And we should mention too, Colleen, you and I know this because you and I previously worked together on some of these issues.
We did. And it was great.
In the interest of full disclosure, in my prior occupation, I was federal policy director at the Council of Nonprofits, and I had the pleasure of working with you, your organization, and many others. And we should be very clear too, it's not just the food shelves and food banks and hunger solutions. It's some of your partners are from the faith community,
yes,
from other nonprofits, from the education, the schools and educational institutions that see the value of making sure that nobody in Minnesota goes hungry.
Absolutely. I think, what we've seen over through the pandemic and afterwards is this real commitment to the fact that we need to take care of each other. And so we've seen a lot of people, regardless of where they stand on other kinds of issues, really be committed to ending hunger and to providing health care.
Mm-hmm. We should go back a second to the farm bill. I don't know, when is it up for renewal again?
We're working on it right now, Steve. So
oh my goodness,
we're getting ready.
So this is something that comes up every several years, where
every 5 years.
Federal nutrition programs are in this. And tell our viewers, there's been an historic alliance between farm interests, farmers, and the nutrition advocates such as yourself. Tell us how
Absolutely.
that came to be and how it's important to the passage of the farm bill.
I think that, there has been a wonderful partnership between agriculture and the nutrition community. And that continues. We just have, the Farm Bureau and the Farmers Union just released a statements about the fact that they didn't want to see them split apart as far as agricultural needs and nutrition needs. And the simple fact of the matter is there are fewer places that are just agricultural congressional communities than urban ones. And you need both people to work together to bring that farm bill through. So it's in all of our interest.
I would just note too, interestingly, I'm here in Eagan and I live in the 2nd Congressional District represented by Angie Craig. This is a congressional district that is actually a mixed district.
Yes.
It has significant suburban population here in Eagan, Apple Valley, Burnsville, but also in the southern part of the district, it's rural, that there are farmers in the 2nd district producing food. So
and you're so lucky that Angie Craig is a wonderful member of the agriculture community and the agriculture committee.
We've had her on this program and we've talked about some of these issues this past summer too. So we're happy to have her there fighting for this. But back on the politics of it, it's really important to have that kind of alliance because it provides the votes to keep the farm bill together with the nutrition programs and the commodity support programs that help the farmers so that you can actually get things done. Well, Colleen, I see I'm sorry, I see our time is up. And
okay.
It goes way too fast. So come back and see us again sometime.
I will. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for being on Access to Democracy.
Okay, thanks.